ON1 just announced the 2026 version of their software. So today we're going to go ahead and take a look at what is coming in the fall with the new version of the software. So here we are with the two new icons, which I think are really cool. I think they look well. So we won't spend a whole lot of time on that, but that's what you should be looking out for in the future for the new version of Photo RAW 2026. Now, here's an overview of all the stuff that will be coming in the newer version of Photo RAW, which is going to be some masking overhaul, new effects and filters. Resize AI 2026 is now integrated, and then we'll cover some other features that are being added into the software. Let's go ahead and take a look at the masking. So with the masking, it's going to be more powerful and a little bit easier. We're going to get the ability to select a subject with a single click. So I imagine this is going to be in the drop-down menu where our AI masking tools already exist. It's just going to be one that says select subject, just like it said for the foreground and background in previous instances of ON1. Then we're going to get this ability to create a new masking layer overview, or new mask layers, I should say. And essentially you can stack, combine, or subtract multiple masks. So this is going to be, I think, similar to what we see inside of Lightroom. And I also think that this is going to be a learning curve for many of the users, long-term users of ON1 Photo RAW. If you're jumping into ON1 brand new and for the first time, I think that this is going to be something that you're like, okay, I don't know anything else about ON1, so this is going to be fine. But the cool thing is you're going to be able to essentially create compound masking in a easier method than what we've been able to do in the current versions and previous versions of ON1 Photo RAW. So now we have new filters coming in. All right, let's take a second to talk about this. We have new effects filters that are going to allow for more creativity and be less complicated, which I'm all for. Now, I do have screenshots of the top 3 items here: the depth lighting, the motion filter, and the split field. But we're going to briefly talk about each of these items. So the depth lighting, it's just going to allow you to adjust the lighting and color of the foreground and background. We've seen this in Luminar Neo, so now we're getting this tool inside of ON1 Photo RAW. We also get a motion filter, and this is not to be confused with the motion blur. I think that these are 2 separate filters, and this one is designed for realistic, intentional camera movement after the shoot or after you shot the image. Favorites and search in app filter dialog. Customers can tag go-to filters, hide unused ones, and streamline filter selection. So that's actually, that should have been a separate thing. So my bad. Anyway, those are 2 separate things. You're going to get the motion filter, but you're also going to be able to select, I guess, your favorite filters, so only those show up whenever you open the filter pane. And then we have the split field, which it simulates a split diopter effect to enlarge backgrounds without losing wide angle foregrounds. We'll take a look at that and I'll share my comments. The next filter, which I don't have a screenshot for, but I look forward to seeing how it's going to be implemented, is the double exposure. And for those who know what a double exposure is, you essentially take 2 images, a background image and a foreground image, and you blend them together, keeping one image bound inside of the other. It's typically black and white. It's really fun and creative. I think that this is going to be a filter that simplifies that. We'll see how it works, because this will be, I want to see how this works. With that being said, we also have a starting point for presets, which I think is just going to speed up our ability to work inside of the effects filters, or the effects module, I should say, by allowing us to essentially create a preset of filters that we always use. So what we're seeing is a lot of customization of the workspace in this 2026 version, from the favorites for the search filter to the starting point presets, and some other things that we're going to see a little bit later. This is what the depth lighting filter looks like. And I think that it's cool. It's pretty straightforward. If you look over here on the right side, we have the usual suspects of opacity and styles, but then we also have this brightness section, which allows us to brighten the foreground or the background. But what is most interesting about this particular filter is the simplicity of the depth. Now, I can't really make out how well this is going over or how the masking preview is showing up in that little thumbnail there, but I would be interested to see how this works with the depth slider. If you turn on the masking overlay, are you able to see what that depth actually looks like in the image? And also, is this going to go beyond just the depth lighting filter with this single slider? Because right now, if you want to refine the depth mask inside of ON1 Photo RAW, you have to use the levels tool inside of the properties pane. And that could be a little challenging and difficult to use. I find it a little confusing sometimes personally, because there's just three nodes that you have to know which way to pull them. Whereas this one, there's only one node, and you pull it to the right, you pull it to the left. And if you can do that while looking at the mask overlay, then that's just going to simplify using depth mask, which are a very powerful tool and can allow for some very creative looks on your images. So I hope that they simplify the depth tool or the depth refinement with this type of slider. And then everything else I think is pretty straightforward and uh, easily discussed. So I'm not going to spend much more time on this because we also don't have anything new with the exception of this little blank oval, which I'm not sure exactly what that is. So we're just going to move on. This is what the motion filter looks like. Now we'll come over here and talk about the left side because I think that that's the elephant in the room. We'll talk about this left side over here in a bit, but in the motion filter, which again, I think is going to be separate from the blur filter, we're getting some of that blur-esque feeling or like look, but what I'm really noticing here, beyond, the tools over here, because those aren't as important to me. What I like to look at when I'm looking at a blur effect is how well does the blur work with the edges of the mask? Because right now, if you blur inside of ON1 Photo RAW, the mask does not always look sharp and clean. And you can see here that this tire is pretty sharp, and the shadows are even looking pretty decent and sharp around the head, on the arms. Everything looks really crisp. So it looks like the masking technology when it comes to the blur tool, and or at least the motion blur motion filter, when you call it the right thing, the masking rendition is a little bit sharper and cleaner. Now, it gets a little wonky right here in between the driver's leg, or I guess that's the passenger's leg, and then on the tips of the shoes. But I'm nitpicking. Hopefully you can clean that up because everything else looks really clean around the edges. Now, what's also cool is this doesn't seem to be like, just looking over here on the left side, you have the layers pane, I guess, nested in the left side, which is probably a new user interface aspect of ON1 Photo RAW. So that's kind of cool to see. But there's only one image in the layer pane. Now, I don't have any reason to believe that this was a stamped layer and then they deleted all the other layers. So this seems to be a single image, and then you just apply the motion blur. The reason I call that out is the way that I have found to get the best motion blur effects, which I showed in my Adamski effect, is you duplicate your layer and you cut out your subject, and then you leave your subject on the top layer, and then you make the background layer and you apply your blur. That way your subject stays sharp along the edges, and then the blur is not impacting your subject at the edges of the subject. So that's why I call that out. Now, what's cool here is you can essentially nest your layer properties, which or I'm sorry, your layers and your properties pane inside of the left column. And that's right above the presets here. So that's interesting. We'll see how that works out in the final version of ON1 Photo RAW. And then we still have this blank thing. So I feel like this is just a part of the effects module, because when you have effects selected, it looks like you get this little blank oval here and whatever's in that drop down. So we'll see how that all works out. This could actually, now that I think about it, this could potentially be the preset thing that we read about with the filters, because that was a part of the effects module. So we'll see, when this comes out, what that is actually like. But this is what it looks like for the motion filter. Then we have the split filled filter, and this is that diopter simulation. And the tool over here has the appearance and then the position sections, if you will, and you can kind of increase the scale, I'm assuming above the break or however you rotate this masking bug. I like when they use similar tools that people would be familiar with if you've used ON1. So I like that the masking bug still looks the same. They didn't come up with some new gradient mask look that requires you to think a little bit harder about how to use it. If you've used the masking bug in previous versions of ON1, when this gets applied, it looks like it works the same. It's got a different color. So hopefully that's helping to indicate that you're not using the masking bug for a mask. You're using a tool inside of the split filled filter. So that's interesting. But you can also apparently apply a mask to this. So I think that there's going to be some very unique, flexible things that can happen with this, but time will tell. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on all of that, but yes, this is what the tool looks like inside of ON1 Photo RAW, at least with the screenshot that we're getting right now. So I mentioned it earlier, but Resize AI 2026 is integrated now with the ON1 Photo RAW 2026 version, which is actually really fitting and makes perfect sense. All right, so you're going to get access to the newest model of Resize AI, which is really good from what I understand. I can't say that I'm speaking from experience. I've only read some reviews about it, and a lot of people are very satisfied with it. And even some people that I've talked to offline are also satisfied with the Resize 2026. So I think that that's cool, that if you had your eye on it and you're like, but I want to wait to see if the 2026 version gets it integrated, the good news is it does. All right. So, but what I want to focus on is this model down here, which is the 2026 standard model. One of the biggest challenges that I think people run into with using any photo editing software, but it seems to come up a lot with ON1 Photo RAW, is their computer specs are not to the recommended requirements. I run into this often in my coaching calls, and so much so that we start talking about their computer specifications when I start coaching them inside of ON1, because I need to know where my limits are of what I can actually do with them inside of the software. Because what I have experienced, and I'm not speaking on behalf of ON1 for this, but what I've experienced is if you don't meet the recommended settings that are on the ON1 website, you're not going to get the best performance with the AI tools. And I think that that's fair and to be expected, because ON1 is saying like, hey, this is what we expect the computer specifications to be in order for you to get the best experience out of the software. It's not to say that it won't work. It's to say that you may not get the best experience, all right? And best is subjective. I'll leave it at that. What I will note, though, is many of the basic features like the masking tools and the filters where you're just pulling the slider, those are going to work fine on the computer. What's cool here is they have a standard model of the 2026 Resize AI, and this seems to work well with people who have older GPUs. Now, I don't know how old, right? If you got a GPU from the MS-DOS ages, you're probably out of luck, all right? But if you have a GPU that was produced somewhere in the past 8 years, possibly this is what they're focusing on, like, somewhere in that ballpark. I can't tell you exactly, so, I'll leave it at that. Other new features and experience updates, I'm just gonna like rapid fire through these. The first one is a negative mode, so you can scan digital film and you can use ON1 to kind of do color correction and things of that sort. So if that's something you're into, ON1 can be a solution for that. UI improvements, we've seen some of those in the screenshots, but it's clear that you can dock things on either side of the ON1 editing workspace. So you got those, and then it says that you can take a tool panes and make it float. So that's cool. And you get to customize your workspace. So more to follow once we get our hands on the actual software and get to test out the UI. Then, of course, we have grayscale support. I don't really use this or need it, but I guess for those who are scanning in grayscale images from legacy cameras, you can work. So that I think goes hand in hand with the negative mode. But then we also have improved perspective tools for those who do architectural photography, keystoning, all that good stuff. You would get like these black lines or black gaps, I would say, on the side of the frame, and then you have to crop it in. So it looks like we're going to get some new tools to eliminate those black edges or blank edges. All right. Then you get this first run experience, which I am really, really looking forward to, because as an educator in the ON1 software space, many people have the same questions. And if there is a tool that could just be integrated into ON1 that helps the user learn how to use the software, that would be amazing, because then everyone is at the same playing field when it comes to how do I use the software. What I would like to see and what I hope is integrated with this is there's an experience level that ON1 asks you, and it is then tailored to that experience level. So if you're a complete beginner, never touched a photo editing software a day in your life, and ON1 is the first program that you pick up, they should be able to have a first run experience for a beginner. And then if you are an intermediate to advanced, which I think this is targeting the intermediate to advanced people, because it says that they're migrating from other platforms in their press release. That's their expectation. That's the audience that they're looking at building this for. Instead of the beginner aspect of this is an exposure slider, it will make things brighter or darker in your image. Maybe it's more of a, this is the develop module, and this is where you will create your base look for your image. And then you can move into the local tab to apply more robust and refined selections of, adjustments. And then the effects tab is where you can stylize the image, like helping people understand the layout and the flow of how ON1 works compared to other editors. I would also like to see an option, hopefully, this is just Chris fantasizing, good idea fairy type stuff. I'd also like to see an option for like, I just switched from Capture One, and then the first run experience starts to tell them like what things are similar to Capture One and how their workflow is going to change. I created a whole video of like, I switched to ON1, what the heck happened to my workflow, which was received well, but I'm hoping that there's something a little bit more tailored. I know that that's going to take a lot of work and likely won't be built into the tool, but maybe over time, with the 0.5 releases and stuff like that, we'll see first run get a little bit more intricate to switching from other software. And then the last thing here is the expanded camera support, which I think is cool, but I don't really have any of these cameras, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about that. So now that we have all the information of what is coming in Photo RAW 2026, the question is, Well, when can I start to purchase it? Well, it's available for pre-order right now, and when it is actually released in the fall, you'll get a copy of it. Now, the good news is if you pre-order Photo RAW 2026 and you don't already have Photo RAW 2025, you'll get a copy of that as well. Now, if you have any concerns or questions, maybe you're working on an older machine and you want to see if this software is going to work for you, my recommendation is that you go to the ON1 website, download a trial version of Photo RAW 2025, which is the current version or release of Photo RAW. See if it's working well on your computer. And if it does, then you'll be able to gauge if it's going to be good for the 2026 version. Now, the second most question that I get asked is, well, Chris, there's two versions of ON1 Photo RAW available. Which one do I need? And that's kind of what the graphic on the screen is going to help with illustrating. So the first one here is the base version of ON1 Photo RAW. It's going to come with HDR, which is the ability to blend multiple images. It's going to come with ON1 Effects, which is where all the filters are located. It's going to come with the No Noise AI, which is the denoising software. It's going to come with Portrait AI, which is a portrait enhancing plugin or module that's built into ON1 Photo RAW. And then it's, of course, going to come with the updated or upgraded version of Resize AI 2026. You get all of that with the base version. You also get the ability to host plugins from ON1 Photo RAW. All right. And what that means is if you're editing an image, you can open up a plugin like Nick Collection, Boris Effects, things that I've demonstrated here on the channel. You can do that from the base version of ON1 Photo RAW. That's what you get with this. It's a standalone application that works on your computer. You get all of those things that I talked about. Now, for those of you who are using Photoshop, Lightroom, Capture One, Affinity Photo, even Apple Photos, if you're using any of those programs as your primary editor or as, the place where you start working on your images, then you may want to consider getting the ON1 Photo RAW Max, because this is going to allow you to open ON1 as a plugin in those programs. And that's the big difference with these two programs, right? Once upon a time, ON1 used to sell one version of ON1 and it worked as a plugin inside of Photoshop and Lightroom. But I don't remember which version of ON1 they kind of separated that, where you had to start purchasing the plugin separate. Well, now what they've done is they've included the plugin version. So if you want to pick up ON1 like it was in legacy versions where it just worked as a plugin inside of all the software, then that's when you would pick up the Max version. This is only for the people, like ON1 Max is for the people who are using it as a plugin inside of other programs. All right. I just wanted to make that as clear as I possibly can, because that is a very common question that I get asked. Now, of course, if you want to pick up any of these, there are affiliate links down in the description box below, and I greatly appreciate your support in that way. If you have questions, leave it in the comments section. And until next time, I want you to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.